On the morning of May 23, 1934, a tan 1934 Ford Deluxe with a young couple left Canfield's Cafe at around 9 a.m. They proceeded south on Main Street, and a few minutes later, here, 7.5 miles south of Gibsland, Louisiana, the couple found their friend Ivan Medvin's truck broken down, and as they stopped to help him, they had no idea that 6 lawmen, Prentice Oaks, Bob Alcorn, Henderson Jordan, Ted Hinton, Frank Hamer, and Maney Gault, were less than 25 feet away, ready to ambush and end the saga of Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow. The following is an interview in its entirety of the day's events with Perry Carver, Bonnie and Clyde historian and owner of the Bonnie and Clyde Ambush Museum. On May 23, 1934, at approximately 9 o'clock in the morning, a Ford sedan rounded the corner at Highway 80 and Main Street here in Gibsland, Louisiana. The Ford pulled up to what was then a cafe, and one Mr. Clyde Barrow exited the vehicle, went inside, got 2 sandwiches, one for himself and one for Bonnie Parker. When they left the cafe, they headed up Main Street, and within a few minutes met the demise that Bonnie Parker had been pictured in her head for the whole time.
Perry? Yep. How'd you get to
Gibsland?
Gibsland?
Research. When I would come out here and do research on the ambush back in the early 80s and stuff, and it just became kind of a home away from home.
Yeah.
I mean, eventually it became my vacation every month.
But you would do it once a month?
No, once a year, I'm sorry. You know, most people plan their vacation for Daytona or the beach or something. I get to where I'm going to Gibsland.
Yeah.
You know, and this was way before the museum was here or anything like that. Back then, they'd run you out of town.
Yeah.
You had to be real careful who you talk to people, or
Really?
what people you talk to. But eventually, in the mid-90s, it started opening up. All the older people that had something to do with the story were passed away.
Well, you know, there was a murder that took place in Coweta County back along the same time period, it's the same way. They made a movie out of it, Murder in Coweta County.
Yeah, Randy Griffith and Johnny Cash.
You know, being from Noonan, that was still a touchy situation because family members are still both in both counties.
Yeah.
And so you still have to be careful about, you know,
It's not
who
that
you're
old
talking
of a
to and
history.
what you're talking about.
It's not that old of a history. Joplин's the same way.
It's 70 to 80 years and that's it, you know, and it's not like it happened back in 1776 and, you know, the kinfolk don't even know their kinfolk.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Joplin's the same way. Several different people owned the apartment where the gun battle happened, and they would want to put a bed and breakfast there and make it like a tourist thing. And there were still family members around there when those 2 officers were killed.
Right.
And they didn't want anything to glorify Bonnie and Clyde. And I don't think anybody that's in this, or Dillinger or anything, we don't do it to glorify any of it. It's just to keep the history alive, remember what happened.
Right.
And try not to let it happen again, you know. But it's you went through the museum, there's nothing back there that glamorizes them.
No.
They would have been the first ones to tell you it wasn't glamorous.
Right.
Actually, Blanche and W.D. Jones both said, and Billy, Bonnie's sister, said it wasn't no picnic. It was nothing like a 67 movie where they're riding, getting away from the cops, and they're laughing and shooting. Now, there was none of that.
Right. Well, I mean, you know, it's kind of hard to laugh when you got a bullet in you.
That's right, and they were, you know, it just seemed like they were, you know, it had its points where Bonnie would be real depressed, like this is all there is, but they tried to glamorize their life a little more than it was.
Right.
I mean, they lived out in the woods a lot.
when I did my opening this morning, because I got here a little early and I took some shots outside and everything, I touched on the fact that this was actually their last stop before the kill site.
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about that.
Well, they've been in and out of this area for about 2 months. Henry Method, the boy that betrayed them, their family was actually lived right beside Bossier. But when Bonnie and Clyde started coming this way, they moved up in this area. Somehow down the line, A.B. Method was related to Henderson Jordan, our sheriff up here. Mm-hmm. And she wanted a pardon for Henry.
Right.
So they had a middleman that they worked with, a man named John Joyner, who would send messages back and forth. He actually got $900 for what his participation in it.
Right.
And in 1942, Henry Method actually had an affair with Joyner's wife, and Joyner killed his wife and killed himself.
Oh wow.
He didn't kill Henry. But anyway, they were in and out of this area. They stayed down in Mangum. They camped out a lot. You know, a lot of farm area, wooded area. They felt safe there. The night before the ambush, though, they had to go back. Henry had got away from them about 2 weeks before the ambush.
Right.
I say get away. They were down in Shreveport. He went into a little sandwich shop. The police pulled up. Bonnie and Clyde left him.
Right.
They had
Well, he took that as an advantage to get away, too.
He did. He certainly did. He called his parents and said, I'm away from them. Let the sheriff know, do what y'all got to do. I'll hide out. And there's some controversy of what Henry did those next 2 weeks. Some people said Henderson Jordan had him in protective custody. Mm-hmm. Others said that he was staying with a cousin, that Clyde didn't know where he was. And so we're not really sure, but he wasn't with them.
Right. And that's kind of like the controversy as to Ivor's truck that morning.
Yeah.
You
Whether
know,
he was out there by it,
right,
or chained up in the woods.
Right.
But he was by that truck. He didn't want to be, you know, he knew what was at stake. Clyde had actually bought him that old truck. Mm-hmm. You know, he didn't, you know, nothing against Clyde, you know, but he did kind of want his son to get a pardon. They made him stay out there by that truck. Several people saw him out there. You know, it was still a working road.
Right.
The school bus had come by there. Other people had come by and seen the truck. But he had met with Clyde Monday night down at Black Lake. That was their rendezvous point. And then Clyde kept going down there looking for Henry. He said, I'll make sure Henry's here, you know, Wednesday morning. Come on down to the old house about 9:30 or something, and, you know, I'll make sure he's there. And that's what they were doing. Actually, Clyde and Bonnie stayed in the old John Cole house the night before. Bonnie had been sick, and she was in bad health.
Well, they stayed in the house that night.
Yeah.
How was it that they ended up coming into town and then heading back out?
They left, from what I understand, they left about 6:30 that morning. Percy and Terrell Metford, brothers and cousins of Henry, had followed them to the house that night because they liked Bonnie and Clyde. And made sure they got into the house. They followed them to the house and left the headlights on so Clyde could get her inside. She was sick. But they got up the next morning and they went to Arcadia. There's a back way around Arcadia. They took that route. They had to get Bonnie a few supplies, and they just came back through this way. Stopped in Gibsland, got a couple of sandwiches, and it just worked out perfectly for the officers. Right. I mean, there was going to have to be some luck involved that they did actually come down that road when they did.
Now, when you say they got sandwiches right here.
Yeah.
In this building.
Yeah. Yeah. This was Canfield's Cafe.
And
the cafe is actually where the museum is.
Right.
We have expanded the museum. We're still in the same building, but we have some dividing walls. So this is Bonnie and Clyde's last stop cafe now.
Yeah.
And it's good. Very affordable. And, you know, it's just something I wanted to do when I came out here. I'd always told Boots I want to open a sandwich shop because they were paying rent, you know,
Right.
for the building. And if I was going to be here the rest of my life, I wasn't going to pay rent.
Right.
So I bought the building, we put a roof on it. I had to make us think about it because there was some problems with the guy wanting to sell the building, but it all worked out.
Right.
And it's expanded. And
Right.
the story just keeps growing.
Right. Well, you know, Gibsland, it's halfway between, pretty much halfway between Monroe and Shreveport.
Yep.
And you kind of think of it like Gibsland is the most famous unknown place there is.
Yeah. And it helps we're just a mile off of I-20.
Right.
But I remember coming into Gibsland for years, and like I said, the story's always fascinating me. But when I got here, I felt like they were really with me. I'd go down some of these old back roads that Clyde would travel and stuff, and I've been living here now for 4 years, and I kind of lost that feeling. Sometimes I have to just go out and get on some of these roads and
Sure.
remember, you know, why I love this so much, because it's a tragedy. The story, you know, for them, their family, their victims' families. I've actually interviewed some of their victims' families who never actually knew them, you know,
Right.
but they said, you know, you wouldn't even be talking to me had Clyde not made him famous.
Yeah.
You know, that's kind of like Billy the Kid, I'll make you famous.
Yeah.
You know, and Clyde would tell his sister, he said, sis, they were shooting at me. You know, they were trying to capture me. I was just shooting back.
Right.
He told his sister.
He just had better firepower.
Yeah, he did. But he'd tell people, you know, his sister especially said, you know, it physically make me sick. You know, to think I actually want to go out and kill somebody,
Right.
it's wrong in itself. He said, but things being what they are, I'm not going back to prison. And he said, it's no secret. I've put it out there. If you come after me, be ready. You know, I'm not surrendering.
Right.
And it was sad, you know, that several people saw Clyde say his prayers. They said he was very, you know, religious to a point. You know, he did say his prayers. I figured, you know, you thought you might die tomorrow. You're going to say your prayer.
Oh yeah.
But they kind of knew what was in store for them, and that's a hard way to live.
Isn't it?
You know, they tried to ambush him and kill him in Sowers. So they knew that they aren't out to capture us. They want us dead. They want to kill us.
Right.
And that's a hard way to,
Well, you know,
exist.
Bonnie was always writing poetry to
Yeah.
that same effect.
Yeah.
You know.
And she kind of knew it'd be somebody they knew that would betray them. That would be the only way they'd get them.
Right. Well, there's a Judas in
Yeah.
every one of those groups, right?
Yeah.
You know, everybody knows the theater where Dillinger got popped. You know.
They do a reenactment there every year.
You know, but Gibsland is, unless you are specifically looking for basically, no better way to put it, the death site.
Yeah.
Ever since the interstate came in, Gibsland's off the map.
Arcadia is our parish seat. Arcadia is our big town. Bienville Parish is a big parish. A lot of little towns here.
I've noticed that.
Clyde went through a lot of them. Ringgold, when you read their books about them, you'll hear Ringgold mentioned, Castor, Bossier. They were around this area. And some of the stories are exaggerated. There's a little town right outside of Monroe, and they have a story that they heard Clyde was going to rob the bank there, and they were ready for him. They were all up on the roofs of the buildings, and they come flying through town. Bonnie was driving, and Clyde was on the running board with a machine gun shooting. And, you know, at that time, Bonnie couldn't walk, much less drive.
Right.
And they weren't in good health. Believe me, they did not want gun battles. They couldn't walk. You know, they were they were weak. They really close to the end, relied on other people to help them.
Lead poisoning has a way of doing that, doesn't it?
Yeah, and there's a good possibility he had lead poisoning. They didn't do autopsies on him. They didn't do blood work on him or anything.
Right.
Because
they just put them out on the slab, took pictures, and
said they died by gunshot wounds. Yeah. Bonnie's life insurance policy paid double indemnity for accidental death. She was considered collateral damage. Those officers knew who they were dealing with.
Right.
They knew the true story about them. Right. They did not want to shoot her. The rumor was she was 2.5 months pregnant. You know, there are going to be people that vehemently deny she was. You know, both Parker and Barrow family say there was no way she was. Mm-hmm. But the rumor around here was so strong that the sheriff and the deputy from Arcadia both went to their graves believing they killed a pregnant girl. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was, they didn't do an autopsy. They didn't want to know.
Right.
You know, but immediately after they were killed, there was all kind of trash put out there about them. You know, Bonnie was a lesbian nymphomaniac, screwed everybody in the gang. She drank like a fish. She was a cold-blooded killer. Clyde was a psycho killer, a homosexual, and you know, it's just all the stuff that we know now wasn't true.
Yeah.
But they did everything they could just in case. You know, it ever came out that it was beyond a shadow of a doubt she was pregnant.
Right.
You know, those officers dealt with this the rest of their lives. It haunted them. They all were alcoholics. None of them profited from it. None of them benefited from it. They gave very few interviews. Hamer turned down a lot more interviews than he ever gave. Henderson Jordan, he did give an interview with one of the True Detective magazines. Mm-hmm. But that man's hair turned solid white 2 days after the ambush. Prentice Oakley was 27 years old the morning he shot them, and he became an alcoholic that day. It haunted them. You know, they were just, when they walked up to that car and looked in, they were just two dead kids. Because they looked like high school kids.
Right.
They were not these two vicious looking, you know,
right.
killers.
Well, yeah, the movies, especially the one that came out in '67.
Yeah.
You know, portray them as, you know, if you look at those movies, Faye Dunaway and all them, they're in their 30s.
Yeah.
Okay? But these were two kids.
They were a lot taller than Bonnie and Clyde.
Yeah.
They were very small in stature.
Small, and what, Clyde was like, what, 27?
Yeah. He was 25 when he died. She was 23.
Okay.
He was 5'7". Buck was 5'5". You know, 120 pounds, and they had Gene Hackman playing. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of benefits to the '67 movie. Number one, it was Gene Hackman, Gene Wilder, and Faye Dunaway's first movie they ever made.
Right.
Of course, after that, Faye Dunaway thought she had the call on everybody that ever played Bonnie Parker, but she did not play Bonnie Parker good either. Not the real Bonnie Parker.
Right.
She did not play her the way she really was. That Warner Brothers was sued by the Hamer family for defamation of Frank Hamer's character, and they won an undisclosed amount. The Barrows sued them. They got nothing because the Barrows could not get no respect.
Right.
W.D. Jones sued them because he said the character of C.W. Moss made it look like he betrayed them.
Right.
And he was killed before that ever got settled. But there's a great interview in Playboy in '68 where W.D. tells his story. And he said, you know, he had to be careful because W.D., I believe he killed Doyle Johnson Christmas night. He had Clyde by the throat, and Clyde just couldn't get, you know, and out of panic, W.D. was 17 years old, and he shot him. He may have killed one of the officers in Joplin. We don't know for sure.
Right.
You know, Clyde could have killed both of them.
Right.
You know, there's always a story that Clyde killed Howard Hall in Sherman, Texas. We know for a fact Clyde wasn't even in Sherman. The guy the people that actually kind of saw it, witnesses, said the robber was over 6 foot tall. He was a lot taller than Clyde. But just about every small town in Texas had a story for Bonnie and Clyde.
Right.
And anybody that says that a boy and girl came in and robbed that bank, it was not Bonnie and Clyde. It might have been the Davis girls. There were 4 sisters out of West Dallas from the 1920s into the 70s robbed banks. They ran with the same boys Bonnie and Clyde ran with. They were actually arrested in Mississippi with Ralph Folks and Floyd Hamilton. They would tear their dresses, and the guys would say, "We just grabbed these women off the street." They'd let the girls go. But the girls were the brains of the outfit. There were 4 of them, and it was. They actually robbed the Beaumont National Guard Army. You know, they got their ideas from Clyde.
Right.
Clyde robbed 3 National Guard armies.
Well, that's where he got his BARs from, yeah.
Yeah, and his 45s, he had getting hand grenades. He never threw a hand grenade at anybody. And we don't think he ever killed anybody with a BAR. He had that stuff as a deterrent, you know.
Well, if you're laying down enough lead, you're going to keep your head down. Yeah.
In Dexfield, I mean, it's a good point to show that Clyde wasn't a cold-blooded killer. Because when those lawmen came in on them, he shot over their heads, you know, so they would hit the ground. I mean, he could have mowed them down. I mean, he could have killed a lot of those men, but he didn't. He shot over their heads, and they tried to get away. And in turn, Bonnie was shot in the stomach, Clyde was shot in the shoulder, WD got a chest full of bird shot, because a lot of them old guys had their hunting rifles, didn't he? So he got shot in the bird shot. Buck was shot in the back. He'd already been shot in the head in Plant City, and they captured Blanche.
Right.
You know, so even out of desperation, he didn't just cold-bloodedly kill those people. You know, he tried to get away.
Right.
And they got 30 miles on a stolen Plymouth running on kerosene. You know, so tell me they didn't have an angel sitting on their shoulders sometimes.
Yeah.
The morning of the ambush, the first 2 shots, Prentice killed them both. Prentice is pretty much, most people say, you know, they give him credit for killing Clyde. You know, his first 2 shots hit Clyde dead in the head and killed him.
Right.
Well, he had a 35 caliber and he was 20 feet from him. He popped off 2 shots and Bonnie was sitting right next to Clyde. Those shots went right through Clyde and right through her.
They were done at that point.
He killed both of them, and I think he knew it. He was 20 feet, he saw it. Right. He told people that he don't remember any of it. He said he remembered one minute he was kneeling behind a bush, and the next minute he was fine.
Speaking of the bush, like I told you this morning, I made it. Do you need to go check on that?
It may be Belinda. It is.
Okay. Speaking of that, I told you this morning I made it out to the kill site yesterday evening, right at golden hour, and I was thinking back to some of the video footage I've seen. You know, at the time it was a dirt road, not a paved road. The road was probably half the size of what it is now.
It was 19 foot wide. But if you stand on that hill and you look from one end and you look to the other end and you go back and you look at Hinton's Field, you know that is the spot.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
People have tried to say, well, no, they were killed down the road. They had to move it up here because of the traffic. There's no traffic on that road.
No. There's no traffic on that road now.
Now, you're right.
Much less back, in 34.
Yeah.
When it's a dirt road.
It was the old Sales Highway, and it was considered a logging road.
And so I was thinking back and taking a look at it, and then of course going back to my scout days when I was an Army Scout, and I was thinking that location for those 2 individuals was absolutely the most perfect ambush spot you could find.
The sheriff found the spot, he set it up. You know, it was the sheriff who knew this area.
And they would have, because of the vegetation in the area. Now, we are talking 70 years later. Pines grow.
Yeah. There are no original trees down there anymore. It's a logging community.
Yeah. You can walk through there and tell those trees were planted.
Yeah.
And pine trees don't take that long to grow that big.
No.
But without having the like residential and commercial buildup, yeah, you take the trees out, but then you put the trees back in, your vegetation is going to still stay kind of the same.
Yeah.
And if you think back to it being a dirt road, the ditches were not like they are out there now, where it's a gradual slope away from the road and then back up.
Right.
Your ditches on a dirt road from then, especially if you're looking at the video, you know, at the video that was taken then, the ditches were like 2 feet wide.
Yeah.
They were actual ditches that I grew up with in South Georgia.
If you fall off the road, you're stuck.
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially in those cars back then that had the smaller width tires.
Yeah.
So that, thinking back about that, you had to have somebody right there on the road that could identify him. It was pretty much when they're coming up the hill. If Clyde was at his normalcy with driving, you're going to know it's Clyde.
Yeah.
But then once they get up to you, you can't just indiscriminately start shooting at a fast-moving car because it might not be there.
Right.
You got to have somebody ID them.
Bad bit, but Bob Alcorn and Dead End could identify him on the spot. Ivy did too. Like I said, Ivy didn't want to be out there, but he did. And Clyde stopped the car and he pulled up and shifted down the first gear, but he stopped. And Ivy walked up to the car and he said, "Bonnie, I need a drink of liquor." And there was a logging truck coming down the road. And Clyde said, "Let me pull up and I'll pull over. We'll get you a drink and we'll fix your tire." And Ivy stepped back. Clyde started to pull up. And Prentice shot him. Prentice thought he was pulling off. You know, as soon as those first 2 shots, bam, bam, hit,
Everybody opened up.
Ivy went down. You know, Ivy hit the ground. And because they weren't shooting at the ground, you know, they were shooting at, you know, a lot of people were flabbergasted that the car still ran. The car rolled down the road about 50 yards into a ditch. And they reached in and cut the car off. And they sat down there for anywhere from 2 to 3 hours. It varies on who you ask. But they were waiting for a record to pull the car back. When they pulled the car into Arcadia, the record dropped it right there in town. And the people swarmed the car.
Right there by the school?
No, they stopped that's in front of the school up here in Gibsland. You know, they said that they...
So that was here in Gibsland?
In Gibsland, yeah. That's right up the road, the old school. There's part of the old school still there, but most of that's gone. There's still a school there. It's our pre-K and things like that. But he stopped there. The older kids were supposed to come out and see their bodies, but all the kids came out. And he got... The record driver, you know, got a lot of trouble, and his story was the record broke down.
Yeah.
I had to let it cool off.
Right.
And then they pulled it on up into Arcadia, and then he dropped it and he left. People swarmed the car, and Bob Alcorn said, "We got to get this car to a safer place." He reached in and cranked up the car, you know, and then drove it into the impound lot. So the car still ran.
Right.
The sheriff would move it periodically. He was charging people a dime to see it. So he was moving it from barn to barn. The actual owner, Ruth Warren, had to come down and take it to court to get her car back. He didn't want to give it back. His story was I put my life on the line to kill these two.
Right.
I'm keeping the car.
Right.
And the judge said, no, you're not. It's her car. She gets it back. And she actually drove it. She put a sheet over the front seat. And she drove it from Arcadia to Shreveport. And then put it on a train and took it back to Topeka, Kansas.
And so how did now was that a 34 Ford?
It was a 34 Ford Deluxe.
Okay.
The Deluxe had the trunk on it.
Right. And it was V8, right?
Oh yeah.
And so how did, you may or may not know, I'm pretty sure you do, what's the, lack of better terms, chain of custody on that vehicle? How did it get to Nevada?
Well, Ruth Warren took the car back. Her husband wanted nothing to do with it. From what I understand, it eventually caused them to divorce.
Really?
He wanted nothing to do with the car. He had bought it for her brand new, and like in 2 days, Clyde stole it. They got it back with like 35,000 miles added to it or something. Anyway, she leased it to Dr. Charles Stanley, who was the crime doctor. He was going to college, to study criminology. And she leased it to him for a few years, and he would tour the car. He eventually bought the car, continued to tour it, and then he sold it to Ted Toddy.
Now Ted Toddy is here, right? Who's Ted Toddy?
Ted Toddy was a kind of a carny himself. He made pictures, movies.
Oh, wait a minute. That's the one that was in Atlanta.
Yeah, he was in it.
Okay.
He lived in Marietta, Georgia, for a while. That's where I kind of came into the story. My grandparents knew him.
Right.
But when he eventually moved back to Texas and he died, and his family sold the car to a gentleman in Nevada who owned a casino. And he was a young guy. I think he bought the car for I think $169,000. It may have just been $69,000. Can't really remember. But after a few years, he auctioned it, and Whiskey Pete's bought it for $250,000, and that's where it's at now.
Whiskey Pete's Casino.
They bought it in 1988. In 1987, the car was taken on the Great American Race, which was a cross-country race. They actually put some sheet metal in the car and covered up some of the bullet holes on the inside so the shards wouldn't get the drivers. They cleaned the car out. All the original glass was taken out. The upholstery was taken out. They just basically ruined the inside of the car historically.
Right.
It's just a shell of the car now. They're asking $5 million for the car. If they had never touched that car, left that front seat the way it was, it'd be worth $5 million. When at one time Marie Barrow took Clyde's death pants and cut them up into 1-inch swatches, and they were selling. If you did that to that front seat of that car, you could probably, especially with their blood on it, it's as morbid as it sounds, it's priceless.
Right.
I mean, there are people out here that just are fascinated with Bonnie and Clyde.
Right.
And to have part of their DNA would just be unbelievable.
Right.
I've got 2 small pieces. I've got several pieces of the glass from the death car. And Mr. Toddy gave it to me. And Ken Holmes had some, the original owner of the museum. But I've got 2 small pieces about this big each, and they both have the blood on them. I've been offered $5,000 for those 2 little pieces of glass. I won't sell them. I mean, it's part of what I do.
Right.
But it's just, you can imagine what that car would be worth had no one ever touched it.
Right. Now, speaking of Marietta, Georgia, that's how a Georgia boy gets to Gibsland, Louisiana.
Yeah.
And you used to go and play in the car.
Yeah.
When Toddy had.
Yeah.
Where was the car?
It was in Marietta, Georgia, basically set in his garage. He would bring it out and show it every so often, especially after the movie came out, but he didn't go that far with it. And like I said, he was basically a movie maker. He made black films, you know, with black actors. I mean, he was a white man, but it was just, he was a very unique person. He actually owned the car that I have here at one time. I have a title with his name on it, but he had sold it to another gentleman who continued showing it as the real car.
Even though it really wasn't.
It really wasn't. But Toddy wanted to make a new movie, and he was going to use his car as collateral for the bank. And a couple of days after he applied for the loan, they called him and said, there's another car running around saying it's the death car. You have to prove that you have the real one. So he took it to federal court in Atlanta, Georgia, and Ted Hinton came and proved that he had the real car.
Right.
And so that's the one in Whiskey Peaks Casino is the real deal.
Okay.
They have several little artifacts out there that Clyde had made in prison and gave to Marie.
Right.
But there are several places you can go in this country and see little exhibits.
Right.
But this is the only place that is a real museum and has real artifacts too.
Right.
It helps being friends of their families and the Hinton family. And I met cousins and nephews. Actually had Floyd Hamilton's grandson come in the other day.
Really?
Very cool. Very cool. He kept, you know, Floyd was his grandpa.
Yeah.
That's how he kept talking about my grandpa. My grandpa would say this, my grandpa.
Yeah.
You know, and Floyd was Raymond Hamilton's older brother. Floyd is the one that set up the East Ham prison break. That's always been credited to Clyde, because Clyde wanted to do it, but he never did. But Floyd and a guy named Jimmy Mullins planted some 45 automatics and some brush piles out there off the prison grounds. And Clyde was the driver.
Right.
But it was Floyd. Floyd eventually became public enemy number one as a bank robber. He served some time in Alcatraz.
Right.
And eventually, he was one of the old ones that died of an old age.
Right.
You know, there weren't a lot of them, but there were some. Ralph Foltz, he run with Clyde. You know, they eventually, later in life, I mean, and it wasn't, you know, something they did young.
Right.
They were old when they finally changed their lives around.
Right.
You know, so we were too old to rob banks, but you might as well get on the right hand of the Lord.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what I think I'm going to do now is go through the museum and videotape some of it. I'm not going to videotape it all because we want people to come here and
see it
and see for themselves, right?
One thing Boots wouldn't let you do, he wouldn't let you take pictures back there. I don't care if you take pictures. You know,
well,
I want people I know that some people may only come through here once in their life.
Right.
But I have a lot of repeaters.
Well, we want people to come here.
Yeah.
The town, I was in my opening a little while ago. I was talking about how the town reminds me so much of like Fort Valley, Georgia, and etc. And as much as they believe in flying their American flags here, which there are several, the Christian flag nearly doubles the American flag here.
Yeah.
And the back roads, especially the one going out to the kill site, you have the old hardwoods that are coming out over the road like a canopy, much like what we had in Savannah and Tybee Island, which, by the way, Perry has frequented the same dirt that I have in Georgia.
Yeah, we got a house on 2nd Street in Tybee growing up. I mean, I spent many years out there, you know, on Tybee Island. In Fort Pulaski, I was telling you yesterday, I've battled many Yankee soldiers coming in there, standing on that Fort Pulaski wall.
And I was talking to Kelly last night, and I said, you know, how is it that you come to probably the smallest town in Louisiana and find a guy that has he's, you know, there's property in Noonan, there's property in
Yeah, my grandmother.
Tybee Island.
My grandmother grew up in Maney, Georgia, and well, like I said, we had a house on 2nd Street in Tybee until about 17 years ago. You know, my stepfather passed away. Me and my sister just kind of got out of it.
Right.
But it was has a lot of memories there. My sister still goes to Tybee a lot.
Yeah, and it's highly, it not highly possible, but it's not, it wouldn't be unheard of if you and I actually passed each other walking down the street somewhere.
River Street, I'm sure.
Yeah.
We, you know, when we would go, we always go to Savannah.
Right.
You know, you always have to hit River Street at least once.
Absolutely.
Down there.
Absolutely.
And I've been around, but it's a small world.
Yeah.
You know, and I have a lot of people from Georgia come here.
Yeah.
Because of I-20, you know, from Atlanta to Dallas. I have a lot of people come in, you know, from Georgia. And like I was telling you earlier, at one time, I thought of, you know, opening a museum there, and I was actually living in Conyers then. The old town of Conyers, they fixed up where it looks kind of like New Orleans. Because they do a lot of filming in Georgia now.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Conyers is really a cool little town, the old part of it. And I thought of, you know, opening a museum. I said, but Bonnie and Clyde, I know they ran through there. None of these gangsters, though, from out of state would rob anything in Georgia. In 1931, that movie came out, I Escaped the Georgia Chain Gang, and it really scared these guys. You know? They would go through Georgia, going to Florida or somewhere, but they wouldn't rob nobody.
Right.
You know? They were just traveling through. Because Clyde went everywhere.
Right.
He spent time in Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, Louisiana, but he went every day he was moving.
Right.
That's one thing to help keep him alive.
Right.
And it's just like the Dillinger gang getting caught in Tucson, Arizona, but didn't have to fire a single shot. Those guys let their guards down. You know, a lot of people think that Clyde got comfortable around here, and he let his guard down there that morning. In all honesty, they were ready to go.
Right.
They were miserable. They were tired of running. A year earlier, Clyde might have seen that old truck from a distance and I don't like that.
Yeah.
I'm turning down this dirt road.
Right.
And the side engine really didn't see it. And that mini-series that came out a few years ago is entertaining, but it's not factual.
Right.
They got timelines messed up, people in events wrong. Everything's just wrong with that movie.
Right.
But the ending, where the little reporter says, and I believe the reporter was supposed to be Jan Fortune. Jan Fortune was a reporter out of Dallas that wrote a book, Fugitives. She hung out with Bonnie's mom and Clyde's sister, you know, for a long time getting all this information. But anyway, she said, don't you feel bad about just shooting Bonnie and Clyde without giving them any warning? And Frank Hamer's character says, ma'am, we gave Bonnie and Clyde exactly what they wanted.
Right.
And that was the best part of the whole movie because they made him famous. You know, it helped. Like I said, the first 2 shots killed him. If it would have ended there, who knows if we'd been talking about it.
Right.
That car helped make them famous.
Right.
Frank Hamer being on their trail helped make them famous.
Now, for those that don't know who Frank Hamer is, that's the Texas Ranger captain that sort of headed up the whole posse here, right? No?
Hamer was, he was hired by Lee Simmons, the director of prisons in Texas. He'd actually asked 2 other Texas Rangers to go after him, Wolf Gonzalez and the other slips my mind right now. But they both said, we don't kill women and we don't ambush people. So they turned it down. Hamer wasn't a Texas Ranger at that time. He had resigned basically when Ma Ferguson became governor. He said he wasn't working for a woman.
Right.
So he was doing security work for a railroad company, I believe.
Okay.
And Lee Simmons asked him to go after him. You know, so he hooked up with Maney Gault.
Right.
And for 102 days, they trailed him. They came in and out of Louisiana talking to sheriffs and stuff. And the sheriff was actually up here in Arcadia, was working with the Bureau of Investigation to try to capture him.
Right.
He knew they were here for a while and didn't care. They weren't hurting nobody. They were actually helping more people. But when the boys from Texas come looking for him, he said, well, I better do something.
Right.
And the Bureau got word that Bonnie was pregnant. And morning of the ambush, they could not be found. Actually, a couple of days before the ambush, Henderson they couldn't be found. So he called the boys. They were staying in the men. They were staying in Shreveport. He said, "I know where they'll be tomorrow morning. If y'all want to be part of it, come on." So they came on up to Arcadia. He deputized them, and they did their thing. There's all these rumors that Hamer got all of Clyde's guns and stuff. No, he did not. He had no authority here.
Right.
Had they killed him in Texas, he could have had everything.
Right.
But he didn't. He got his fishing pole, and he got a BAR that was hit during the ambush. All these things about taking Clyde's guns, no, he did not. The sheriff in Arcadia got the guns.
Right.
His family, his son, grandson, I still believe they have some of the guns.
Yeah, I was noticing that you had, the two Texas Rangers, whether one was a Texas Ranger or not anymore, and then you had Sheriff's Department deputies. You didn't have any Bureau. There was two groups missing. FBI wasn't here, and Louisiana Bureau of Investigation.
I don't think we had state bureaus back then. It was just the Bureau of Investigation,
Right.
and they would go into states. Now the Bureau kept files on Bonnie and Clyde. I actually sell them here, the FBI files. You can download them. But it's almost 1,000 pages of information that the Bureau kept on Clyde. Because he was taking cars across state lines
Oh yeah.
all the time.
Oh yeah.
But they would not go after him. And then the only thing I could think of is they were scared of him.
Yeah.
They were scared of him. But when they killed Clyde, the 6 officers got so much media attention. J. Edgar Hoover said, they'll be the last 2 that locals kill. We're getting the rest of them.
Right.
And 6 weeks later, 2 months later, they got Dillinger.
Right.
They got Dillinger July 22nd. Then they got Pretty Boy Floyd. They got Babyface Nelson. They killed the Barkers.
Right.
They were gonna. This was gonna be his stepping stone,
Right.
not these local yahoos.
Right.
So, but he had the files. The FBI files are awesome to read.
Yeah.
They got just about every car he stole, their license plates numbers, guns. I mean, they were very thorough, and a lot of the things that are wrote in there, I believe are wrote because they think that's what Hoover wanted to hear. Because if you didn't please that man, even in the beginning, he
Right.
did it.
Yeah. I'm gonna go ahead
Yeah.
and let you get to work, and I'm gonna go.
The Bonnie and Clyde Ambush Museum is now in the building that used to be the Canfield Cafe. The museum is small but absolutely brimming with information, both real artifacts and replicas. But the absolute best thing about the museum is actually Perry Carver. He has probably forgotten more than most people ever learned about Bonnie and Clyde. So if you find yourself in Louisiana, somewhere between Monroe and Shreveport, take a few minutes and stop off in Gibsland. The museum and the cafe are at 2419 Main Street. Grab the cheeseburger. It's outstanding.